I used to believe that motherhood guaranteed loyalty. That if you poured everything you had into a child, your strength, your youth, your sleepless nights, your last dollars, your dreams put on hold, there would be a day when that child would look back and say, "Mama, thank you." I believed that. I lived by that. I sacrificed because of that. My name is Margaret Collins, born in 1962 in a small Mississippi town where people minded their manners and children said yes ma'am. I grew up with calloused hands and a determined heart, and when I became a mother at 22, I promised myself my daughter would never know struggle the way I had. I would give her more, better. By the time she was 5, we had already moved to the suburbs. By 10 years, she had dance lessons, birthday parties with balloon arches, and brand-name shoes I couldn't afford but bought anyway. By 16, she had a car before I ever did. I worked 2 jobs, administrative assistant by day, cleaning offices by night. Some mornings I'd sit in the parking lot before work, hands trembling from exhaustion, whispering, "Just hold on. It will all be worth it." When I bought my first home, our home, I cried in the empty living room. Not because it was large, it wasn't. Not because it was luxurious, it wasn't. But because it was mine, ours, safe, dependable, and paid for with sacrifice instead of luck. My daughter, Ava, grew up with everything I never had. She went to college, the first in our family. I co-signed loans, sent money I didn't have, skipped medical appointments, sold jewelry my mother left me, and told myself, "She will remember this. She will appreciate this." I didn't know then that love doesn't guarantee gratitude. I didn't know then that raising a child doesn't prevent them from breaking you. I didn't know then that the very roof I paid for, the home I maintained alone for decades, would one day be the place where I would be told I no longer belonged. Ava was always bright, too bright, some said. Sharp-tongued, ambitious, and eager to distance herself from anything that reminded her she came from humble beginnings. When she was a teenager, she rolled her eyes at my work uniform. When she grew older, she flinched when I spoke with my southern drawl in public. She corrected my grammar the way some people swat flies, aggressively, impatiently, disgustedly. But she was my daughter. My only child. My whole world. And so, I excused things. When she forgot my birthday, "She's busy." When she didn't come home for Thanksgiving, "Travel is expensive." When she only called when she needed money, "She's still growing." But the truth was harder, colder, she respected everyone but me. Still, when she graduated and moved back home while job hunting, I welcomed her with open arms. I stocked the refrigerator, washed her laundry, and told her she could stay as long as she needed. Then she met Michael. I should have paid attention to the first time he visited. Ava introduced me not as Mom but as Margaret, like I was a landlord and not the woman whose body tore to bring her into the world. He looked around my home like it was beneath him, too modest, too plain, too old-fashioned. That was the beginning. I didn't know it yet, but life was shifting. And the ground beneath my feet was about to disappear. Michael didn't move in right away, not physically, at least. But his presence seeped into my home like a draft through an old window. Suddenly, Ava started making comments she never had before. "Mom, don't you think the furniture looks outdated? Maybe you should consider dressing more modern. Michael says the neighborhood is kind of low-tier." Michael says, that phrase became the third resident of my home. I tried to ignore it at first. Love makes parents foolish. We tell ourselves that our children will come back to themselves, that they're just influenced, distracted, caught up in the glow of romance. But Ava was not drifting, she was transforming. One evening, I made dinner, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, cornbread, the kind of meal she used to ask for on her birthday. When she walked in with Michael, I smiled and said, "I made your favorite." She sniffed the air, then whispered to him, thinking I wouldn't hear. My mom still cooks like it's 1990. They ordered takeout instead. I ate alone at the table that night. The food tasted like nothing. My chest felt tight, but I said nothing. Because that's what mothers do. We swallow hurt like medicine. Weeks passed, and Ava started spending more time at Michael's place, an upscale apartment in the city, one he made sure everyone knew he could barely afford, but acted as though he owned. Every time she visited me afterward, she seemed more embarrassed by where she came from. One afternoon, she walked into the kitchen while I was wiping down the counter and said casually, "Mom, have you ever thought about selling the house?" I froze. Sell the house? Why would I do that? She shrugged. It's old. You're getting older. Wouldn't it be better to move somewhere smaller? Maybe assisted living eventually? Assisted living. As if I were already fading. As if I were a burden. I laughed it off, but that night I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, listening to it tick the way my heart did. Something was changing, and it wasn't just my daughter, it was the way she saw me. Not as a mother. Not as the woman who raised her. But as an obstacle. The cracks were forming. And soon, everything would split open. The first time I met Michael's parents, it was by surprise, my surprise, not theirs. I walked into my own living room and found them sitting there like royalty waiting for an audience. Ava beamed like she had just unveiled a new car. Michael introduced them with an air of entitlement, as though my home were merely a temporary venue for their comfort. His mother looked me up and down, smiling the way someone smiles at a chipped teacup, polite, but dismissive. "So, this is the house," she said, her voice dripping with judgment. "Not your house. Just the house." His father wandered through the hallway without asking permission, inspecting photos on the wall, tapping the banister, checking the finish on the wood like a property appraiser. Ava didn't notice my discomfort. Or maybe she did, and didn't care. They stayed for dinner. They didn't compliment the meal. They didn't thank me. They spoke loudly about renovations and open-concept layouts and modern upgrades. At one point, Michael's mother said, "You know, Ava and Michael will need more space once they start a family. This house could work beautifully with a little updating." Ava nodded eagerly. My heart stuttered in my chest. Start a family? Here? In my home? I looked at my daughter, waiting for her to correct the assumption, waiting for her to say I wasn't going anywhere. She didn't. Instead, she said, "We've been talking about it." That night, after they left, I confronted her gently. "Ava, are you planning something you haven't discussed with me?" She sighed, annoyed, as though I were the one being unreasonable in my own home. "Mom, don't be dramatic. We're just exploring options. You don't need all this space. And Michael's parents might stay with us for a while when they relocate." Stay with us. A word that no longer included me. Something inside me went cold. The kind of cold that warns of winter long before the snow falls. I didn't sleep that night. And for the first time ever, I wondered. What if my own daughter is capable of discarding me? But that day was coming. And I was still innocent enough to believe I was safe. I never thought I would live to see the day. My own daughter. The child I carried. The girl whose tears I wiped. Whose fears I calmed. Whose future I sacrificed for. Would look me in the eyes. And tell me I no longer belonged in my own home. Pause. But that day came. And it came with a coldness I didn't know her heart was capable of. Emotional. It happened on a Sunday. Funny how betrayal chooses quiet days, days when the world moves slowly, when nothing seems threatening, when you believe you're safe. I was in the kitchen making coffee, wearing the same robe I'd worn for years, soft from washing and frayed at the sleeves. The morning light spilled through the window, and for a moment, I felt peaceful, like life was still mine. Then Ava walked in. She didn't say good morning. She didn't kiss my cheek like she used to when she was little. She stood there stiffly, arms crossed, chin lifted, as though preparing for battle. "Mom, we need to talk." That sentence, those 5 words, have ended marriages, friendships, and lives. They hit me like a chill running along my spine. I turned off the coffee maker and faced her. "All right," I said gently, trying to keep my voice warm, inviting, motherly. "What's on your mind?" She inhaled sharply, as though gathering courage, not the kind that protects, but the kind that destroys. "Michael's parents are moving in," she said bluntly. "They sold their house faster than expected, and they need somewhere to stay while they look for a new place." I blinked, confused but not yet afraid. "For how long?" I asked. She avoided my eyes. "A while," she said. "Maybe months. Maybe longer." My chest tightened. "Ava, this is my home. I wasn't asked. I wasn't consulted. Why would they move in here?" She shifted her weight, growing defensive. "Because it makes sense. They're family now. Family, defined without me. Inserted without permission." "What about me?" I whispered. And then she delivered the blow, the kind that breaks bone you can't see. "Mom, you're getting older. You don't need this much space. You should consider moving into senior housing or something more suitable. Michael and I need to start building our lives, and his parents will help with the baby when the time comes." Baby. Future plans. A life built inside my walls, without me. My voice trembled. "You're asking me to leave my own house?" She didn't flinch. She didn't soften. She spoke like someone rehearsed. "It's not just your house anymore. You put my name on the deed when I graduated, remember? You said it was to secure my future." Yes. I had. Because I trusted her. Because I believed love ensured loyalty. Her voice hardened. "So legally, I have as much right to this home as you do. And we've decided this is what's best." We. Not she. Not "I love you, Mom." Just "we have decided." My knees felt weak. I reached for the counter to steady myself. "Ava, where am I supposed to go?" She exhaled impatiently, like I was inconveniencing her. "I've found you a place. A small studio across town. Affordable, quiet, manageable. I already scheduled a tour. But you'll need to move quickly. Michael's parents arrive next week." My ears rang. My heart pounded. My body went cold. "A week?" I choked. "You're giving me 1 week to pack up my entire life?" She shrugged. "You don't have that much stuff." "Not that much stuff." As though my memories meant nothing. As though decades could fit in a grocery bag. Tears filled my eyes, but she looked away, as though my sadness was embarrassing. "Ava, how can you do this to me?" And then she said the sentence that carved a wound I will never fully heal from. "Because you've had your time, Mom. Now it's our turn." My time. Expired. Dismissed. I felt something inside me break, not loudly, but quietly, like a branch cracking under snow. I nodded slowly. "All right," I whispered. "If that's what you want." She smiled, relieved, victorious, oblivious to the part of me that died in that moment. She walked out of the kitchen, humming. I stood there long after she left, long after the coffee went cold, feeling like a ghost in a house I paid for, in a life I built, in a story that somehow no longer belonged to me. And that was the day I realized. My daughter didn't just ask me to leave. She erased me. But life has a long memory. And so do mothers. The week that followed was the longest week of my life. There is no humiliation quite like packing boxes in a house you paid for, slowly removing pieces of yourself while others discuss paint colors and furniture placement for the life they'll live once you're gone. Ava didn't help me pack. She didn't sit with me. She didn't ask if I was okay. She moved around the house like I was a tenant whose lease had expired. Every night, I packed until my back ached, until my hands trembled, until the memories inside each object became too heavy to touch. The photo albums were the worst, pictures of her first steps, school plays, scraped knees, birthday candles, Christmas mornings. Moments when she used to look at me like I was her safe place. Now I was an inconvenience. On the third day, Michael came by with boxes, not to help, but to speed up the process. He leaned in the doorway and said, "It's better to rip the Band-Aid off quickly. Transitions are smoother that way." Transitions. As though my displacement were a corporate restructure. I didn't respond. Silence was all I could manage. On the fifth day, his parents arrived early, days early, and walked through the house while I was still packing, talking loudly about where their furniture would go. His mother said, "That guest room will be perfect for us once it's cleared out." Guest room. She meant my bedroom. I kept my eyes down and carried another box to my car. Nobody offered to help. Nobody thanked me. Nobody asked how I would manage alone. That night, I slept on a bare mattress, surrounded by packed boxes, listening to the sound of my daughter laughing in the living room with the people who were replacing me. Deep thought came. She said I was old. She said I was taking up space. She said her in-laws deserved the house more than I did. The next morning, I left. Not because I wanted to. Not because I agreed. But because sometimes life pushes you to discover who you are. When everything you built collapses. Ava didn't walk me out. She didn't hug me goodbye. She didn't say she would visit. She just stood in the kitchen scrolling on her phone and said, "Don't forget to return your keys once you're settled." Your keys. Not our home. Not your home. Just keys, like I'd been a house sitter. I swallowed the last pieces of my pride, nodded, and walked out. When I stepped outside, the air felt unfamiliar. I sat in my car for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel, unable to start the engine. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked older than I remembered, tired, emptied, discarded. I whispered to myself, "You can do this. You have survived worse." But I wasn't sure I believed it. I moved into a small apartment. Quiet. Unfamiliar. Lonely. The apartment was small, so small that when I opened the door, I laughed, not because it was funny, but because if I didn't laugh, I would fall apart. One room. One window. One sink. One lonely echo. The walls smelled of old paint and forgotten tenants. The floor creaked with every step. The bathroom door stuck when it closed, as though even it struggled to contain me. I set my boxes down and sat on the edge of the thin, lumpy mattress the landlord called furnished living. The springs dug into my hip bones. I stared at the blank wall and let the silence swallow me. I had never felt so alone. At my age, loneliness is a different creature. It's not the dramatic loneliness of youth, the kind that aches with longing. It's the quiet kind, the hollow kind, the kind that makes you wonder if anyone would notice if you disappeared. That first night, I cried into my pillow, muffling the sound even though there was no one to hear me. I cried for the life I built. I cried for the love I gave. I cried for the mother I had been and the woman I no longer recognized. The nights were the hardest. Not because I had nowhere to go, but because I no longer had a place where I was wanted. But pain has a strange way of reshaping us. And underneath the grief, beneath the heartbreak, beneath the disbelief, something else stirred. Something small. Something quiet. Something like resolve. Not revenge. Not yet. Just the first breath of survival. Because life wasn't finished with me. And I wasn't finished either. I just didn't know yet that this tiny, forgotten studio apartment would become the birthplace of my rise. Starting over at my age felt like learning to walk again, with bruised knees, shaky balance, and no hand to hold on to. The studio apartment was small, but the silence inside it was enormous. Days stretched long, nights felt heavier, and the world outside moved on without noticing that I had fallen. The first week, I barely left the apartment. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the one window, watching people walk by, young couples holding hands, delivery drivers rushing, joggers with earbuds, mothers pushing strollers. Life looked effortless for everyone else. I felt like a faded photograph, forgotten, outdated, easily discarded. My body ached from the move, my back stiff, my hands swollen, my knees throbbing. I tried to make a cup of tea and realized I had packed the kettle somewhere in one of the boxes. I sat on the floor and cried again, feeling foolish for grieving a teapot when I had lost so much more. But grief comes in small details, not grand tragedies. The next morning, I forced myself to get dressed, not because I had somewhere to go, but because I needed to remind myself that I still existed. I brushed my hair, even though no one would see me. I put on lipstick, even though no one cared. And I whispered to my reflection. You are still here. On the 8th day, I walked to the small grocery store a few blocks away. I moved slowly, my joints stiff, my heart heavy. I picked up bread, eggs, tea, and fruit, simple things, inexpensive things. At the checkout, the young cashier looked at me and said, Are you okay, ma'am? You look like you've had a rough day. I almost broke down right there, because someone noticed me. Someone saw me. Someone cared, even briefly. I smiled and said softly, It's been a rough season, but I'll be all right. He nodded kindly and packed my groceries gently, as though they were fragile. No one had handled anything in my life gently in a very long time. A few days later, I wandered into the local library, not because I needed a book, but because I needed a place where existing was free. The librarian, a woman with silver hair and warm eyes, greeted me. First time here? She asked. I nodded. Well, welcome. You'll find it's a peaceful place. People heal here, even if they don't realize that's what they came for. Her words hit something tender inside me. I found a corner seat near a window and watched sunlight spill across the floor. I didn't read. I just breathed. And for the first time since leaving my home, my breathing didn't hurt. On the library bulletin board, I noticed a flyer. Part-time receptionist needed. No heavy lifting. Friendly environment. Senior applicants encouraged. Something fluttered in my chest, not hope exactly, but the shadow of it. I took down the number. I almost threw it away twice. But the next morning, I called. The woman on the other end sounded cheerful. We'd love to meet you. Come in tomorrow at 10. No pressure, just a conversation. Just a conversation. Something in me woke up. I wore my best blouse, the one Ava once told me was too old lady-ish. I stood in front of the mirror and smoothed the fabric with trembling hands. At the office, the manager, a woman in her early 50s with kind eyes, smiled warmly. Your resume shows years of administrative experience. Why did you stop working? I hesitated, then answered honestly. I spent years supporting my daughter. I thought family would take care of me later. I was wrong. She didn't pity me. She didn't look uncomfortable. She nodded. That happens to more women than you'd think. When the interview ended, she reached across the desk and gently touched my hand. I'd like to offer you the position. My throat tightened. Are you sure? I whispered. She smiled. You're exactly who we need. I walked out of that building with my shoulders straighter, my steps firmer. The wind felt different on my skin, cool, but not cold. I signed up for the job. Then I was asked to speak. Then I was asked to teach. And suddenly, people were listening to me. My story mattered. My voice mattered. I mattered. My confidence returned. My joy returned. And slowly, so did my life. 2 weeks later, I held my first paycheck in years. It wasn't large. It wasn't glamorous. But it was mine. I bought myself fresh flowers, white lilies, and placed them on the small table by the window in my studio. The room still echoed, still felt too quiet, but now there was beauty inside it. A small beauty. A fragile beauty. But beauty nonetheless. During those weeks, Ava didn't call. She didn't check on me. She didn't ask if I was settling in. But something strange happened. I stopped waiting. The ache was still there, but it no longer controlled my breathing. The sadness still lived inside me, but it no longer dictated my movements. I was still wounded, but no longer dying. Something was changing. Slowly. Quietly. But undeniably. I was rising. Not for revenge. Not yet, but for survival. And survival is the first step toward transformation. Life didn't transform overnight. It didn't sweep in like a storm or bloom like a sudden spring. It changed slowly, quietly, through small moments that stitched themselves together into something resembling renewal. My mornings developed a rhythm. I woke early, not because someone needed me, but because I wanted to. I brewed tea in the small pot I finally unpacked. I sat by the window and watched the sky lighten. For the first time in years, my day belonged to me. The office where I worked was modest. 2 dentists shared the space, along with a rotating stream of dental assistants and hygienists. But there was warmth there, laughter in the break room, birthday cards taped to cabinets, coworkers who asked how I slept and actually listened to the answer. One of the dentists, Dr. Patel, said to me one afternoon, "You bring calm into the room. Patients relax when they see you." No one had spoken about my presence as though it mattered in a very long time. I rediscovered small joys. Organizing appointment books. Comforting nervous children. Remembering people's names. Offering kindness without depletion. I began to smile without forcing it. Days later, since I didn't drive much anymore, I took the bus some days. One morning, an elderly man sat beside me and sighed loudly. "Getting old is hard," he muttered. I nodded, but then surprised myself by saying, "Starting over is harder. But it's possible." He looked at me with curiosity. "You starting over?" "Yes," I said. "And I'm learning that I'm still capable of more than I thought." He chuckled softly. "Good. Because you look like someone who still has chapters left." Chapters left. The words warmed me. I held on to them. I returned to the library often. The silver-haired librarian remembered me. "You look lighter," she said one day. "I feel lighter," I admitted. She smiled knowingly. Women your age often thinks their story is winding down. But sometimes it's just beginning. We spoke for an hour. She told me she had reinvented herself at 60 after leaving an unhappy marriage. She said something that stayed with me. Being needed is not the same as being valued. Learn the difference. I repeated that sentence in my mind for days. It happened 3 weeks into the job. A little boy came in terrified of getting his teeth cleaned. He clung to the doorframe like a koala to a tree. I knelt down and whispered. I get scared at the dentist too. But do you know what I do? He shook his head. I pretend I'm braver than I feel. He considered that, then nodded seriously and marched into the clinic. His mother mouthed, "Thank you." And I laughed, not a thin, polite laugh, but a real one, from deep inside, surprised and alive. Strength returning. My body slowly felt stronger. The stiffness faded. My steps grew firmer. I walked with purpose. I stopped feeling invisible. I bought better groceries. I rearranged the studio to feel like a home. I hung a framed print on the wall, a simple painting of a sunrise. It reminded me that every day started new. One afternoon, as I was sorting old papers, I realized something. I still owned half the house. My name was still on the deed. Ava had wanted the security of my signature, but she had never removed me. She couldn't sell without me. She couldn't refinance without me. She couldn't claim full ownership, not legally. For the first time since leaving, I smiled at a thought connected to that house. My tragedy had not been total. I wasn't powerless. Just patient. 2 months after I moved out, my phone rang. Ava finally called. Not to ask how I was. Not to apologize. Not to reconnect. She called because she wanted something. Mom, we're having a dinner with Michael's work friends. I need the antique serving set you packed. The silver one. Can you bring it over? For a moment, I felt that old instinct, obedience, accommodation, self-erasure. But then something inside me shifted. I inhaled slowly and said, No, Ava. I won't be bringing anything. I'm rebuilding my life, and I won't be an errand service for yours. She sounded stunned. What's gotten into you? And I answered truthfully. Me. I've gotten into me. She scoffed, annoyed. Fine. I'll buy a new one. And she hung up. But I didn't feel hurt. I felt powerful. Because for the first time in my life, my no belonged to me. A week later, Dr. Patel approached me with an idea. We're expanding the practice, he said. I'd like you to manage scheduling for both locations. It comes with a raise, and more hours if you want them. My breath caught. A raise. More hours. Increased responsibility. At my age. After being thrown away. I accepted. That night, I stood in my studio apartment, looking at the flowers on my small table, and whispered, You're not done. You're just beginning. Something blossomed inside my chest, not quite revenge, not yet, but something adjacent. A quiet certainty. That life had watched what was done to me, and was preparing a response. I woke up the next morning with a strange lightness in my chest. For months, mornings had been heavy, like waking under wet blankets made of memory, betrayal, and age. But today, there was air inside me again. Breath that didn't hurt. I made coffee, sat near the window of my small apartment, and opened my laptop. An email notification blinked at the top of the screen. Subject, confirming your teaching schedule. For a moment I thought there must be some mistake. Teaching schedule? But as I read through, my hands began trembling, not with fear, but with something I hadn't felt in a long time. The Adult Learning Center loved my trial session. They wanted me to teach a weekly writing and life enrichment class. They even asked if I would consider leading a course for women starting over after family estrangement. I pressed my hand to my chest and whispered a soft, broken laugh. Imagine that. Thrown away by my own daughter, then asked to guide others through the same pain. Life has a way of stitching up wounds using thread made from the very things that tore you apart. Before I could stop myself, I started writing again, pieces of my story, pieces of other women's stories, lessons I had collected quietly in the background of a life that always belonged to someone else. That day, for the first time, I didn't cry. Not once. When the past comes knocking. 3 months later, I had a routine, a purpose, and a peace I never expected to feel again. Then the phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but habit defeated instinct. Hello? There was breathing. Hesitant. Uneven. Then a voice I once would have recognized in a crowded stadium, but now only distantly. Mom? My pulse stumbled. It was Ava. I said nothing. Silence was the only power I trusted myself to hold. She tried again. Mom. I didn't know who else to call. Not a good start. Not an apology. Not an acknowledgement. Just need. Always need. I didn't rescue her from the silence. I let her sit in it. Finally, she exhaled shakily. It's Michael's parents. They want to sell the house. They said I should move out. For a moment, the world tilted, not because of sadness, but because of the poetic absurdity of it. The very people she pushed me out for were now pushing her out. Life doesn't use gentle ink, it writes its justice in permanent marker. She continued, voice cracking. I thought they loved me. I thought they were family. I could have said many things. Now you know how it feels. You chose them over me. You made your bed. You threw me away. But I didn't. Growth is sometimes the revenge. What do you want from me, Ava? I asked softly. There was a long pause. Then, in the smallest voice I had ever heard from her, even smaller than when she was a child afraid of thunderstorms. I want to come home. And just like that, the truth became visible. She didn't want me. She wanted the security she discarded. The home she took for granted. The certainty she assumed would wait forever. I closed my eyes and let the clarity settle. Sweetheart, I said, voice steady, calm, unmoved. I don't have a home for you to come back to. She became silence. Stunned silence. She wasn't expecting that version of me. The mother who no longer sacrificed herself to cushion her consequences. But, where are you living? She whispered. In a place I chose, I said, a place I earned. A place that gives me peace. She choked on the sound of her own regret. Mom, please. Can we talk? Can I come see you? I breathed in. Slow. Certain. No, Ava. Not right now. And for the first time in my life. I hung up first. The power of walking away. Some people think revenge is fire, explosive, loud, dramatic. But the most devastating revenge is absence. The removal of access. The refusal to be needed. Weeks passed. I continued teaching, writing, living, not as someone recovering, but as someone becoming. My story began to spread, students told others, local organizations requested talks, and before long, a reporter reached out asking to interview me for a feature on rebuilding life after familial rejection. When the article was published, something unexpected happened. My name became known. Not famous, just visible enough that women reached out from everywhere, pouring their hearts into emails, thanking me for giving language to a pain they thought was theirs alone. And somewhere among those messages, Ava sent another email. A long one. A raw one. This time, not asking for shelter. Not asking for help. Not asking for rescue. But saying 3 words she had never said to me in her adult life. I was wrong. I cried then. Not because I wanted her back, but because the wound had finally stopped bleeding. 2 years later, my life looked nothing like the day I stood on the porch and heard my daughter tell me I was old, inconvenient, replaceable. I led workshops. I published a memoir. It became a bestseller among women's healing groups. A podcast invited me. A speaking tour followed. And slowly, beautifully, without planning it, I became whole. Ava and I speak now, but gently, cautiously, with distance and boundaries that protect us both. We meet for coffee sometimes. She comes alone. Never with her in-laws. She never asks to move in. She never hints at needing rescue. She knows that version of me no longer exists. My revenge was not anger. It was not punishment. It was not destruction. My revenge was becoming someone who no longer needed to be chosen to feel whole. I rose. I healed. I lived. And she had to watch. So, if you've ever been thrown away, if you've ever been replaced, if you've ever been told you are no longer needed, remember this. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply becoming everything they said you could never be.